So we'll call to order and we'll do you say Diane's there for roll call, or you want to do it, Jim? I don't.
Diane is here. You want to go, Diane?
Diane is always here. Commissioner Kroon,
Present.
Commissioner Pulowski,
Present.
Commissioner Wachowski,
Present.
Commissioner McKay,
Mackey is present.
Mackey is present. Mackey.
I will remember. Commissioner McLeod,
Present.
Commissioner Baylor,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong.
No.
Is that everybody? You missing anyone?
I think Garrett, is Garrett the only commissioner not here?
I think so.
I believe that is correct.
Jim, go around the room and just introduce whoever's on there so they can introduce themselves, I guess.
Sure. Okay, I just logged another person on. Who just logged on?
And there's a bunch of people hopping on from the construction coordination meeting we just ended, so might need to just go down the list.
Steve, you want to just go down the list and read them out?
Sure. Let me make sure I have a list to read. It's the bandwidth's getting interesting. There we go. Okay. Well, there's me. I'll start with me. This Steve Rebuffo, Port Director. Would 2270611 introduce themselves?
That's me, Steve. Brad.
Okay, Brad, and I think 2464 is Mr. Pulowski. Who is 9563?
Okay, we'll have to call and check on that one.
Anonymous.
Okay, Mr. Dreyfus,
Yes.
introduce yourself, please.
Val Dreyfus Matson.
Cheryl, introduce yourself.
Cheryl Beckham, Port of Alaska.
Mr. Mattingly,
Bert Mattingly, Anchorage Fueling Service Company.
Mr. Blaine,
Roy Blaine, Engineering Manager for Port of Alaska.
Mr. Bull,
Jeff Bull with the Program Management Group for the port.
Ms. Kennington,
Brittany just stepped away. She's Alaska Maritime Cruise Line Agencies.
all right. That was her universal translator. Mr. Vernon, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chris Vernon, North Star Terminal in Stevedore.
Mr. Faber,
Dylan Faber, Community Affairs Manager for Matson.
Mr. Haberman,
You can call Haberman to represent myself.
Lieutenant Owen,
This is Lieutenant Hadley Owen, Alaska Navigation Manager for NOAA's Office of Coast Survey.
all right. Welcome, unassisted this morning. Mr. Jager,
Jim Jager, Port of Alaska.
Mr. Rutgers.
Paul Rodkus, Port Safety Coordinator.
One more time, Mr. Reuter.
That would be me, Tom Reuter, Alaska Maritime Agencies.
Mr. Davenport,
Tony Davenport, Matson GM.
Sharon,
Sharon Walsh, Port of Alaska Modernization Program Director.
And I see Commissioner Wong has joined us. Good morning, Garrett.
Good morning, Steve and all. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. Appreciate being here.
And Mr. Zins.
Ryan Zins, Alaska Basic Industries.
Okay, next. Let's see. I see a whole bunch of invited folks, none of which have signed on as of this point in time. So I think that's everybody who's signed on, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Hey,
and I
Steve,
guess-
sorry to jump in. This is Lev, 9563. I missed it when you were asking earlier.
Okay, thank you, Lev.
Hey, Steve, Mike Thrasher with Coach on.
Thank you, Mike.
Anyone else? We'll include Diane. I don't think we got her counted.
Shannon at the port is on, and Mike O'Shea with Cook Inlet is in here as well.
Very good. Welcome, everybody. Next item would be port safety minute for Paul. You got something for us today, Paul?
I do, Mr. Chair. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just have two quick things. The first is for 2020, the port work team did not have any time loss, injuries, or accidents, and 0 OSHA recordables. We're one of a few departments that achieved that. So that makes me really happy. And for our safety moment today, just a quick reminder, I'm sure most of us have anti-lock brakes, but don't pump your anti-lock brakes if you didn't give yourself enough room between you and whatever you're trying to stop from. Just apply steady pressure, and the purpose of that is so you can steer around things right there. And just a quick reminder on that, and that's about all I have.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for that or comments from the commissioners?
So moved.
And Brad, before you vote, I'm looking at my copy, and on my copy, I have 2 number 9s and 2 number 11s and no number 10. So when we get to that part of the agenda, we're just, I'll try to make sure that we make the corrections to properly number the last 4 or 5 items.
Good catch, Steve. So with those minor adjustments, we have an approval from Ron and a second from Garrett. Is that correct?
Right. Correct.
Okay. Very good. Next on our agenda is the approval of the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes. I see there's a few grammatical errors to correct, but other than that, do we have any motion?
We didn't vote on the other one yet, did we?
Yeah.
On the agenda? Yeah, you voted and Garrett seconded for the agenda.
No, I made the motion, but normally you vote. That's all right. I don't.
Okay. Are you okay with that approval, Ron?
With what?
Of
the agenda?
Is there anybody against the approval of the agenda as proposed with the minor changes? All those in favor say aye.
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 Brad, before
ahead.
we get off of this one, I believe the copies that you guys have might already have those previously identified typos corrected. So if somebody would just take a look, and if they don't, let me know. I think one of them was on item 11, and that's been corrected. But if there are others that we missed, make sure I know what they are, and we'll fix them before we post these finally.
On mine, Steve, I still have 2 9s and 2 11s.
Oh, yeah, but that's on the agenda. I'm talking about the minutes from the last meeting now.
Oh, I didn't realize we'd moved on to the minutes. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
No, we stepped back because we didn't have the vote on the agenda. I'm sorry. He had a motion, but we didn't have a vote. So now we're discussing the meeting minutes, and we had a correction under 6A. She also informed, should be the group. It's TE on 6A. And then on 6B, at the bottom of the paragraph, should say petroleum facility or something similar during a portion of the 2021 PCT construction season. And under item 11, Commissioner Ward thanked the staff, which is one you said was already corrected.
Brad, I missed the 6A correction you requested.
Let's see. Towards the bottom, it said she also informed TE group instead of the group.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And then under item B, last sentence,
There's a word missing.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Have them all now.
Okay. A motion to approve minutes with the changes.
So moved. Aves.
Aves. Very good. Let's have a vote to approve. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
objections? They'll move. Port director comments. What do we have, Steve?
Well, I'll just be a little brief before we turn it over to the staff to go ahead and talk about their points of view, but or their ongoing events. But I did want to mention that I really do appreciate the amount of coordination and work that's been done between the users and the port staff to prepare ourselves for the upcoming construction season. There are going to be a lot of moving parts, and there's going to be a lot of challenges with respect to getting on and off the dock, particularly on the petroleum side of the house, when it comes to watching those monopiles get installed by Pacific Pile and Marine. And everybody has done an outstanding job of walking through the processes and getting getting solutions vetted as much as possible. A lot of really good questions, and some of them didn't come with such easy answers, but everybody has stepped up and done their part to make sure that we looked at every angle on how we can get this stuff done right, and I appreciate that very much. So, and I didn't want to leave that go unaddressed to the commission, because this is not always throw it to the port staff. They can fix anything. 9 times out of 10, I'd agree with that. But there are some that require a certain amount of coordination and mutual aid to pull off. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to help us get this right, or as right as we can, given the circumstances. And with that, I will let you pass the baton to the staff.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Next on our agenda, we have Shannon.
Hi, good afternoon. Things have been going well around the port. Maintenance has been staying on top of things, and today is a fun snow plowing day. It's nice and fluffy snowfall around here. We've been aggressively preparing for this summer, and to Steve's point, we've had great involvement with the port users, and appreciate that very much, to help us make as much of a success this summer as we can. On the horizon for the summer, I did get word that we are going to have 2 potential military vessels outbound in the month of June. roughly estimated the 16th to the 25th, and then 2 vessels returning September 14th through the 27th tentatively. And then still on the horizon of the possible cruise ship in September. Outside of that is normal cargo and petroleum vessels. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Has there been any, I briefly discussed this with some of you folks, but has there been any news on some of the shoaling concerns at the dock facilities? Anything you can address there? I'm not fully aware of all the challenges there, and I don't know if Steve wants to address that later on, but I wanted to put that out there. I guess I should have added that to new business, but we've just heard some discussions in that regard. Just wondering where the port was, and I've not seen any of the data on that, so I'm not sure where we're at.
Well, I'll address, through the chair, I'll address what's going on near the south floating dock and the PCT when it comes to my part. Shannon may want to address the rest of the dock.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Shannon, you have anything else you can add to that?
Yes, we've been watching the surveys as they come in. We are on weekly surveys now. The surveys being performed on Wednesdays and results Thursdays, as long as things go well through the week, and monitoring that. We did do a wash at 2 different points at POL 1 this last weekend and at T3. We are on our second wash for T3 and the first wash at POL 1 to address the high points. Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
No, there really is nothing much more to add than that. As we see the opportunity to mitigate what could be the potential sources of issue, we go after them. But as I've mentioned, there is no such thing as winter dredging. And if there's an expectation that you're going to see the same kind of results from cooking with tug and barge that you see from Manson, just wipe that out of your mind right now, because that ain't ever going to happen. We are going to have to deal with what Mother Nature hands us as the winter progresses, and as those of us that were in the last meeting heard, Manson Construction did get the Corps' contract for the next 3 years, and the target date for their arrival is April the 1st. And they will do what they always do when they get here is, cross the shoal and head right for the dock and go to work. I can't imagine their behavior being any different. And so they'll be, they are reading the surveys just like we are. And they will be prepared to do what it is the Corps pays them to do when they get here. In the meantime, we'll put out what fires we can. And that's, that's as good as it's going to get.
Got you. Ron, what's the UKC at the dock there that you guys go by, or that may be required for the pilot?
The minimum UKC alongside the berth in Anchorage is 3 feet. And I see that, according to the latest survey, maybe I don't have the latest one. I've got one from 20th of December. It's showing quite a bit less at POL2 than we are used to. And actually, it doesn't really, they didn't survey the dock because there was a barge there, it looks like. What's the depth alongside of mean low water right now, Shannon, at POL2?
I'll have to pull up the latest survey, and that was done on the results came in on the 29th of January. I can pull that up.
I don't think that was sent out to us yet on the pilot side. Maybe I missed it, but okay. Well, I'm just wondering. But that's been since 1986. The Coast Guard and the pilots got together and we agreed on nothing less than 3 feet alongside the berth at any time. 3 feet of UKC alongside the berth, and which is why we try to bring them in on the rising tide and get them pumping right away. Then if it's going to be close, we keep a pilot on there. But
yeah, okay, yeah, I know it's a reoccurring issue every year. But I guess, Sharon, you can add if you want when you get up to your report on the petroleum side, but I was just curious because there's been discussion on that regard.
There is always discussion about this.
Anything else, Shannon?
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. Moving on, Roy, engineering services, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we, at the first of the year, we switched engineering as needed service contractors from R&M consultants to Michael Baker. That came in first in our evaluation committee. So we've spent a lot of time this month of January closing down the task orders and jobs with R&M and starting up stuff with Michael Baker. So we're looking forward to the next couple of years with them and getting them off and running. We currently have 2 projects in the works and construction. And then we have 3 projects that are going to, or 4 projects that are going into construction next summer. The good news is we'll be finishing up the last 2 projects that were due to the 2018 earthquake and closing up that FEMA work, which is exciting for us. We also have 3 projects that we're in design right now that we're getting moving on for support of the PCT work at the POVI next summer. So there'll be a lot of coordination with construction because we have quite a few projects going along with Sharon's projects. But that's about it. Any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners? Okay. Moving on, Sharon, port modernization program. What do you got for us, and how's the PCT going?
Okay, stand by while I get my notes up in front of me. Okay, well, PCT is continuing to get ready for this coming year, which is going to be a big deal. We're working with the Build and PIDP grant people to get our grant agreement finalized so we can get reimbursements for the monies that they're going to contribute to the project. So that's, you know, it's Washington, D.C. folks, and I have to say they've been remarkably good to work with, especially as they go through transition on their end. So you know, those grants are managed by the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, and the staff that we're working with in that office has just been they've just been great, the Marad folks. Let's see, going on, we have, for the last year's work, we're closing out the final change orders, and we'll be doing a final payment on that here this spring when they get a couple of punch list items done. On the upcoming activities, the Monopile Fabrication is continuing. It's actually ahead of schedule. These are 12-foot diameter pipes, and they are impressive to look at. So that's kind of good news. That's progressing very well. We all just came from a meeting, and Shannon's been just doing an awesome job coordinating port users with especially the fuel and cement users with the planning for the PCT, because we need to park some of the construction fleet in front of POL2 or have anchor lines in front of POL2, and there will be, you know, there will be conflicts. And so it's been an iterative process, lots of coordination, and on top of that, when we do work tying into the POVI, that's going to create some, well, call it some downtime that will affect the ability to offload fuel. So everyone involved is working very hard to schedule and predict and do their level best to make this thing work, both the users and the contractor. And Roy has his projects to coordinate within all of that too. So it's been a big effort. And like Steve said, we appreciate everyone's patience and creativity and continued input. Let's see, regarding dredging, let's talk about that for a second. At the time that the PCT was designed, the Corps of Engineers modeled the sedimentation expected there, and once it was in place, and that's all, you know, that's what we expect to happen once the thing is built. What we learned from our more recent surveys at the end of the year was that while the barge was, we don't know if it was the barge causing it or what the activity was, but there has been shoaling that's developed south of the PCT and also, well, also around the platform. The Corps will be ready to maintain the dredging profile once the construction's all done. But the issue we have right now is the shoaling has been more than expected. It's never less, right? And we're going to have to address it because we won't have clearance for the construction barges if we don't. So we're just getting a handle on the, we're just getting more accurate surveys. We're getting a handle on quantities, and we will, looks like we're going to have to come up with a way to get that sediment out of there before the contractor starts work, either through a change order to the contractor. It's probably where that's going to go. So they may have to mobilize some equipment of their own. The Corps is not able to help with that dredging because of congressional restrictions on what areas of the port they're allowed to touch. So that's a very big issue for us right now, but the best brains in the team are working hard to resolve it. You may hear about it as the commission because it looks like we'll be going to the assembly for approval for additional money to do that additional dredging. So Jeff can speak to that if there's questions after I get through the rest of this. Permitting is moving along. The PCT itself is permitted. The contractors requested some change in that permit, and so we're going back to the National Marine Fisheries to ask for some permissions to do things a little differently. That's progressing, and South Loading Dock work has been added to the, or is being added to this contractor's work for efficiencies and to avoid a lot of conflicts. And so there's a permit in process for that. The thing to note about South Loading Dock is there will be no South Loading Dock availability this year. And Shannon and Steve and the port and Roy and the port operations folks have been working to accommodate some of the folks that normally use the South Loading Dock during this summer season to accommodate who we can at the North Float. And so if you'll hold your questions about that, Shannon and Steve will want to speak to that. And let's see. Otherwise, the other big news is on the phase 2, the cargo dock planning, programming and planning. We have completed all of the documents and analyses, several in-depth analyses of different things like a berthing analysis to tell us if we need a second POL transfer facility and as a separate dock, or if we can accommodate it on the cargo docks. Lots of different things like moving the berth line, leaving it where it is, or bringing it out, which is the original plan, and analyzing the effects of those two items. And we've delivered those documents to both Todt and Matson. We've been working, and I want to thank both of those companies for the absolutely proactive conversations. And I know they've got considerable expense and some analyses of their own. And we've all been working together to get to a point where we can feel that we're all moving in the same place, and that the getting to a point where we can settle on a preliminary concept design of, as you will, the bare bones that we need to accommodate shipping in the future, and trying to weed out all the fancy stuff and make sure that we're going to build at the minimum cost, but then make sure we take care of the functionality that everyone needs in the future. So we've sent all those documents to Todt and Matson. They're reviewing, and in about a week or so, after they've had a time to digest that, we'll be ready to talk it over and make some decisions about what we go into the design charrette with. We expect that design charrette probably to occur now in about April. So let's see, I think that's the underwater inspection report has been distributed to everyone from the work that Roy oversaw last year of the divers, and that has also underlies the urgency of proceeding with the reprogramming and getting these cargo docks going. And I know that was distributed to most project stakeholders or most port stakeholders. We haven't heard any feedback from anyone, so I know Roy and I are both interested to see if people have feedback on what they're reading in that report. And I think that is just about it. Yep, that's what I got. Questions?
Do you have any questions from the commission here? No, everyone's quiet today.
It must have been a good job.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say on the piling report, what do you think? What's our timeline there for the POL1 before we're just not functional, you think, based on what you read out of it?
Well, Roy can chime in, but as you know, POL1, Terminal 1 is the oldest part of the dock and is in the worst condition. We're talking, we've been saying less than 10 years, We're probably now looking at less than 4 or 5 years. That's a read between the lines of what the data is showing in terms of how thin some of those piling are. And we're not talking, keep in mind always, we're not talking just about danger of an earthquake. Hard docking, something like that. There's other items that could, with those skinny piling that we've got, could really have an effect. And it won't be pretty. So we need to move ahead with the reprogramming at all possible speed. Roy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, this is Roy. I was talking to the engineer that headed up the study, and engineers are funny. They're not super comfortable with putting predictions down on paper, right? Because then if it doesn't happen, or if they're off by a day or a year, they take the flack. So off the record, he told me that we will have a failure, and a failure is a portion of the dock that either shifts or starts to collapse or moves in such a position that we won't be able to use it. He says we will have a failure before we replace the docks. It just takes too long to replace the docks, and that we've eaten up all that time. He says, I'm not sure where or when or how it'll happen, but he says you'll have a situation where you'll have to close part of the dock. So hopefully it's not underneath the cranes, but that's what he told me.
What percentage are we at now of original design are we at for usage, for tonnage?
Yeah, so the best way to I try to do it in my head is that given, and this is based on the design of 1960s, and the engineering world has changed significantly since the 1960s because every event engineers change the way they do things to try to make things a little more robust. So based on the 1960s design, a lot of piling are pretty much 50% compromised. So enough to warrant that there'll be spots of the dock that are going to start to move in some way. Now, that's 1960s. If you were to take and analyze this dock using 2020 structural analysis and codes and that kind of thing, we're probably way over stressed. We're probably in the danger zone. So actually one of my tasks is to have Michael Baker help me determine how many pile failures we can have in a certain section before we start making it dangerous, and I have to start reducing put load restrictions on that section of the dock. So that's something we're going to work on this summer.
Aren't we already under some kind of load restrictions? Is that impacting, I guess, Matson, you guys utilize that portion of the dock with your trucks. I'm just curious if we've seen a decrease there.
I've inherited one section on the south side of the warehouse dock area that is under a load restriction, but there hasn't been any other analysis or observation of failure to impose a different load restriction yet.
But if I could just add something, I think part of what we received from the work we got from R&M over the many years that they were here was that we know with certainty that you can't put all the gantry cranes in Terminal 1 and work a ship in Terminal 1 like you can in Terminal 2 because of the load restrictions on the dock. And we've never put anybody in a situation where we've had to do that since that recommendation was made to us. So you can leave the cranes down here for a temporary period of time in a stored configuration, but to use them in this location right out in front of the the warehouse and the port offices to work the ship, this part of the dock can't handle that load, and we know that now. So we've been operating in that with that restriction now for years.
So the clock is ticking, I guess, is what we're getting out of this. Okay. Any other?
You can actually hear the ticking now.
Yeah. Any commissioners want to have any comments or questions? Is that you, Garrett? Oh, we can't hear you.
No questions.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sharon. Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Yep. Yes, I do. I think I have some good news on the financial report for the year, or at least positive. We ended up with a positive number at the end of the year, so we can be happy about that. We had great tonnage, and we can just, if everyone has had a chance to look at the report, I can run through quickly just to highlight a few items that might be of interest or was of interest to me. So we are.
Can you pull it up, Cheryl?
Yeah, I can. I have it up right now.
It's you say it's unedited.
Makes it easier.
The final.
This is not the final. So what you'll see, right? So the Muni Central Finance basically, allows us to do a lot of our work for reconciliations and things in the month of January, and usually by February 15th we have those completed. I've been through these accounts with a fine-tooth comb, and we've I'm fairly certain that we aren't missing anything. We've got everything reported in the correct categories, and where we'll end up is pretty close to this revenue operating line. Now, Central Finance and General Government may have things that come in that aren't quite posted yet. All of their cash receipts aren't posted, but this is all the booked revenue. So everything is in here, and a good, I would say 95% for where we'll end up with 2020. So the biggest deficiencies that you'll see, right, come from our lack of the cruise ships. They supported a lot of the line item revenue in miscellaneous. So you'll see that while we still had crane revenue and water and things like that for other ships that came in, a significant amount of revenue was lost there due to, the cruise ships not visiting the port. So that's, when I looked at everything, that's pretty much what I could see. We had very strong performance in the petroleum wharfage, and that was all we were happy to see that those numbers and the POL valve yard fees. So everyone was great in getting their numbers done for the year. So this is a pretty good picture of where we should end up. I will mention that the cash and construction investment pool is not something that I enter. Ross and his group at Public Finance, they review all of the year-end financial statements for their money markets and investments. So they will potentially have some changes to that number. So yeah, overall, a pretty good showing, all things considered. We can chat about any questions you might have on the revenues. Okay. So with none, I'll move on. We had our personnel services. This is the payroll was posted through the end of the year. So this is pretty much where we'll end up for our labor. And we had some port vacancies. That's why, you know, we didn't pay wages for some part of the year, and we had some folks come on without a full year, 12-month salary. So that's why we just have a little bit of lag in our personnel services. Non-labor, which is all of our, you know, contractor, you fix this, we'll fix that kind of thing. In the R&M contract, those we always try to come in under budget just in order to make sure that we efficiently operate. So that's Shannon and her crew and Roy and their engineers. So that's a reflection of that performance as well. The legal services, we had with the COVID, when COVID ramped up, Bob Owens indicated that Safarth had some, you know, they closed their shop for a while. There was some lag in working, so we had lower legal bills in 2020 than what we budgeted. But in the end, it was a very good thing because, as you'll see, I'm going to skip over MISA in our debt service line item. So in November and December, Ross and the Public Finance Group sold the bonds and converted the $40 million short-term borrowing program into long-term debt. So just like your home loans, those come with costs and closing costs. So about $1.2 million of the 1.8 that you see was attributed to monies that the port had to pay for basically closing costs to secure the long-term revenue bonds and get that debt all set up to be paid back in 40 years. So what we did was we used our excess legal services budget and we covered the debt service expense that we did not budget for. So you'll see ultimately in the end, there'll be a budget transfer that happens from legal services to debt service to cover the closing costs for those bond issues. So it worked out good for us that we had that budget available. Otherwise, we would have had to go to the assembly and request an additional appropriation to cover those costs. So we were just able to move budget and be on our way. So those are the highlights, the MISA and the dividends. Those have been paid and we've discussed before. We can move on down here to see this little calculation that we do is just to basically show you that this is our net income with our operating and non-operating revenues and our expenses, and then depreciation is added back in because it's a non-cash item. So you can look to see about $2.3 million added to the port equity for this 2020 year. That's what we'll look to see on the financial statements. Here's your tonnage report, which looks to be pretty awesome. All things considered, we had a great year. Everything performed as we anticipated, and then with some additional petroleum on the dock side, that just gave us a big boost in the tonnage. So we were pretty excited and happy to see that. So that's pretty much the size of it for 2020. 2021 is not, Central Finance basically allows everything to close for 2020. So we won't really see any kind of updates to 2021 until mid-February. But by the next Port Commission, we should have a good idea of where we're starting 2021. So I'll take it.
Depreciation and the amortization, what's the variance there?
So the depreciation, the depreciation amortization is a number that is budgeted because we have our net book value report that we have all of our assets in. Those are anticipated, but it's a non-cash item, Brad, so we don't really fund it. It's considered in the rates. When you see Parish Blessing bring forward their revenue requirements report, you know, this is the number in the past that if you were going to set money aside to replace your infrastructure, this is an item that you would include when you set your rates. But over the past 20 years of the port's finances, that's always been something that they have not considered in rate structure. But for all intents and purposes, we still do book the depreciation and amortization.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners have questions, Carol, so far? Anything else, Cheryl?
No, we have our audit scheduled for the first week in April, and that's the only other additional information I'd like to pass along.
Okay. Seeing or hearing no other questions, I appreciate it, Cheryl.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jim, you're up.
Yeah, hello. I will, I'll start by putting on my external affairs hat. On the external affairs front, we are working with the administration downtown on and a couple of port users to generate support for pantry-related funding. Given the state's current economic situation, we think that the most likely funding is going to come through some sort of statewide general obligation bond that would ultimately have to be voted on by all voters in the state or all residents in the state. So we're moving toward that. Our request, we've done some letters and other materials. Our basic request is going to be to ask for money, construction money, to help support the North Extension stabilization work. The reason we want to do it that way is that it's a lot easier to generate public support for construction projects than it is for planning. And that stabilization work needs to be done before we can move forward with the cargo dock replacement. And then assuming we win proceeds with our ongoing Port Intermodal Expansion Program litigation, those proceeds would then go into helping to pay for the cargo dock. So that's our basic strategy there. Are there any questions on that part?
Commissioners, any questions? None from me.
We haven't finalized the number we're asking the state for. That will probably come later in the session as the discussions about the GO bond form up and we find out who all is trying to get items onto the general obligation bond. On the business continuity front, we are making excellent progress on our port power plan. The port power plan, you'll remember, is our plan for basically creating a Port of Alaska microgrid that would help provide backup power in the event of a major grid outage. We're also working with JBER on that plan. When Chugach Electric took over ML&P last year, we started having conversations with them. We've had a number of meetings. They are very interested in developing or working with us on our microgrid proposal and also on our solar proposal. We're actually meeting with a solar developer on site this week to start looking at proposals for developing some solar generation on the port. That Chugach Electric has already expressed interest in buying that power. The basic premise is we want to be able to create a microgrid that will ensure our resiliency in the event of a major port outage so that we can keep producing power to keep the port operating. We're also hoping that this project will end up reducing energy costs for some of our port users, as well as reduce our port-related greenhouse gas emissions. So we are making good progress on that. We're working with Department of Energy and Chugach engineers right now. I expect to have what's called a one-line drawing of what the project would look like probably within the next month. And I also expect that we will start pursuing funds for specific pieces of the project probably within the next month. Finally, if I put on my security hat, we are back to normal port security status right now. Earlier this month, in the period around the inauguration, we actually had to elevate our vigilance in response to national warnings about protest and domestic terror events. We were not particularly concerned that somebody was going to protest at the port. The concern with facilities like Port of Alaska was more of a diversionary tactic, where if protesters wanted to have an event somewhere else in the vicinity, they might have a diversionary tactic here at the port. So we raised our security vigilance status. We're back down to normal on that. Other things going on in the security world. We are working to resolve a recent security issue regarding inbound containers and whether they're sealed or not. So we're working on that. We are working on working to develop our new TWIC standards. The Coast Guard is about to raise TWIC requirements, especially with regard to cruise ships, but they haven't given us our final standards for what we're going to have to do to meet their rules. Our access, on a related front, our access control system, we do know is not going to be supported by the manufacturer anymore, starting sometime in the next few months. So we are in the process of specifying and getting cost estimates on a replacement system that will also meet Department of Homeland Security's new access control requirements. These requirements are not only related to who can get onto the port, they're also related to how the cyber piece, the online piece of the project works, so that we can't be hacked. I'm expecting to have a rough cost estimate for an upgrade probably within the month, and then we will have a meeting with the Port Security Committee to discuss how to move forward on that. On a related note, the radio communication system that we use to have our access control and our CCTV, our security television system, to control the communications for those systems, is also getting old and needing to be replaced. So I'm working with Roy on figuring out exactly what the specifications and costs for replacing that system will be. And I expect that we'll also discuss that with the Port Security Committee next month or later this month. And finally, on the CCTV front, we are within probably a week or so of finishing up a pretty major refurbishment of our television system. We're putting new cameras in and improving the computer systems. So that's coming along very nicely. And that's pretty much my report.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments on Jim's report? Seeing none, we'll move on to old business. I guess one thing talking about the legal costs, I was wondering if we have any updates on the Marriott lawsuit. I guess I want to.
Yes, we do.
On that.
Trial begins on February the 16th. It'll be, it'll be done virtually. So there are some challenges with those folks that live here in Anchorage who are not going to now fly to DC, or the federal court coming here and using the federal courthouse. Everything will be done via, is it Zoom, Sharon? One
It's,
of these,
yeah, it's going to be done. Actually, I think the judge is in San Francisco, so that's the base location for the trial. And
okay.
those of us that are testifying from Anchorage will be doing so from the office of the municipal attorney. I believe it is a Zoom situation.
Yeah. So the prediction, the schedule says 2 to 3 weeks to get through all the witnesses. How soon after that the judge, because it's judge only, so how soon after that the judge will render a verdict? I have heard nothing to that yet. I suspect it's not going to be the day after. It's not going to happen as fast as it happens on a TV show. So we'll have to be a little bit patient to wait for the judge's ruling, and what comes after that will be anybody's guess. If it goes our favor, are there going to be appeals? How long is all that going to take? If it doesn't go our favor, are we done? All good questions that I can't answer now, but we are at the point where we feel very comfortable and confident that we're prepared for trial. So we will be starting that on February the 16th. And fingers crossed, folks. There's been a lot of run up to this and a lot of discovery and a lot of depositions. And I'm glad to hear our attorneys anyway feeling very confident about how things are going. They have pretty much, if you're stacking motions on the plaintiff side, motions on the defendant side, and who's winning, I think the winning side has been us. And I'm hoping that's a good sign as well.
Yeah, well, that'd be a nice line item off our expense side to see go away. For sure.
Hey, Brad, before we go to old business, can I ask a question to Cheryl on finance? Sorry for this late question.
No, go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Cheryl, I know we've discussed this in the past, but that we're putting money aside in our budget for future work, future construction. I recall we had a great conversation on, hey, we inherited this and there's been no money ever put aside, and looking forward to set our predecessors, everyone coming after us up for success. I was wondering, Cheryl, what our plan is fiscally. We have a little bit of money here. What are we doing every year to put money into a pot, if you will, for the future?
Right. That's a great question, just to keep it on the, forefront of everybody's mind, because, and I'll just digress and say I had an interesting conversation with the finance director at AWU, and, her and I were chatting about depreciation because, the port has always treated it like a non-cash item. And she was just about fell out of her chair. She said, you guys should be including that in your rates. Well, our story is we've always been able to secure funds to, get the infrastructure that we needed. So the goal was always to keep rates as low as they possibly could be for the users. So, given that we're transitioning out of that, the time to continue to remember and recall this conversation is when we sit down to do the rate review on the tariff in September, right? So we have, and I'll have to go back and look at the model, but I can get that and send it to you. I'm not quite sure if we ended up with a 40% recovery in our current rates, or if we just decided to pass on that until the next time. I think that, Parish Blessing really, really tries to encourage us to set some kind of depreciation plan in our rates. So I can't recall I do think that we had some in there, Paul, but I can pull that latest plan up, unless, Steve, you recall, to see what we decided to do on the most recent rate structure.
Yeah, I do recall, don't ask me for numbers, but I do recall the conversation, and the decision was, because the first opportunity to make the decision as to whether or not to leave the tariff rates on the same path that they're on now, and basically bank what would be unnecessary to continue to cover the debt service, because the remainder was going to be 2023. So when we, as Cheryl said, when we look again in September, we'll certainly look to see if we're on that same path or not. Mm-hmm. And then, left to our own devices here, we would bank it. But that call is not going to get made until there's some kind of vetting, particularly at a port commission meeting, because this is a change in behavior for all of us. And it has to be done with an understanding that we could have dropped the rates because we now have them set at a point that till the end can cover the debt service. So here's your choices. Put the rates, leave the rates where they are and never raise them again, or keep the path that we're on and bank the difference for the future. We're not at a point yet where we can say, and come September, we're going to make that call. Come September, we're going to look to see if we can still make that call in a couple of years. The path that we're on now, unless things have changed dramatically, and after Parish Blessing looks at what the revenues were this year and looks at what the tonnage was this year, may change that. It may be sooner yet. But we'll get to that point, and that will be a publicly vetted decision. I can assure you of that.
Right. And one of the great things with our 10-year tariff that we have, just as a sidebar, is that, you have the ability to ramp up. You don't have to, you can avoid rate shock. You can implement it over a 5-year period to get from, we're going to recover 10% of depreciation in our rates to 100%. So, it gives the market the ability to, travel along without rate shock. So, those are all things that we've chatted about and talked about. But Steve's right. It's it's not we're going to turn the switch and just recover 100%, because it would just, destroy everything.
And another point that I want to make sure everybody understands clearly is that we are going to do, we're going to do what's best for the port with whatever extra revenue we've generated from the plan of finance that we have now and the associated tariff rates. There's no plan to put that money in the port's pocket to do stuff other than cover debt. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of us doing it in the first place. And it's not a cash cow. It will never be a cash cow that we can, pull from to do other stuff. That's been made pretty clear to us if we were even thinking of going there. But I think we're disciplined enough to know that there are better ways to handle that which might be considered a surplus beyond what we need to handle the debt service now, that makes way more sense in the long run. And that's what we'll focus on.
Right. Along with the debt service comes a lot of debt covenants. So the port has to understand, or, be sure that its actions and its operations meet those debt service covenants that the lending institutions have put on us. And one of them was, that we have to maintain 120 days cash balance of operating. So we weren't even hitting that mark initially. So it's a process, and it's one that I think eyes wide open for everybody is the best way.
And we've promised you all that every September, we're going to have this conversation on how things have gone in the preceding year, how we see it going for the last quarter of the year, and what's the way ahead, what's the best way ahead under the circumstances. And we bring Parish Blessing to do that, to come back and do that. And that's in our plans for this coming September as well.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that update.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Moving along, old business. We have the tariff surcharge for cargo dock design, which we've postponed due to some additional information and research by the port. I think until we all are comfortable with that conversation, we do have time, and with the hope of dealing with that moving forward. Do you have any comments on that, Steve?
No, just to kind of paraphrase what you said, Brad, and we approached the Port Commission about a week or so ago because we wanted, Cheryl and I were not comfortable with what we would have asked you guys to finally take a look at and vote on today. There was a little bit more homework that needed to get done, and because the port has committed to cover that portion of the design costs that would be associated with 2021. And as we introduced the last time, it's all with the understanding that anything we do that's a tariff impact doesn't go into effect until January the 1st, 2022 anyhow. that we've got a little bit of time to make sure that we've turned every stone and that we've looked at what it is we think we need to charge to cover that which Jacob says we're going to need as fairly as possible and as thoroughly as possible. So that little bit of extra time, I think, will give us something that we'll feel a lot more comfortable defending if it's necessary to do so at the next Port Commission meeting. I'm pretty confident we'll have it done by the next Port Commission meeting, and might even more confident that we'll have it in the hands of the Port Commissioners well in advance of the next Port Commission meeting, so you can beat us up with questions if you think it's necessary to understand it all before we all reconvene and formally make a vote on it.
That was more of a nuts and bolts kind of information, right, Steve, as opposed to a change in the model or how on that?
No, there's the only changes the changes will more so come out of the model based on modified inputs that go into it. But I think in the end, we're going to find that it's fairly close to what it is we've got now. But the challenge has been wrestling with what the petroleum contribution to the design effort for Jacobs and their design folks as they do the preliminary design for petroleum infrastructure on the cargo docks. There's a cost to that. What is it going to be, and how do we, quantify that for recovery? That's what's being vetted right now. And you, if you recall at the last meeting, that was just a big question mark to begin with. It's not much of a question mark anymore, but we want to make sure that it's as fair as possible under the circumstances. And it's taken a little longer than we thought it would take to do that.
So it'd be fair to assume the petroleum piece is part of the cargo dock per se, or the design of the cargo, not a separate entity. Is that what you mean?
Well, unless the petroleum users say, never mind, we'll wait till we replace POL2, then yeah, there's going to be some portion of the design effort that's going to be committed to working out the details of petroleum infrastructure on cargo docks, and it's not fair to ask the cargo guys to pay for that. So,
right. In round numbers, though, we can say that I was talking about those preliminary documents and analyses that have been done, and in round numbers, to not build a second POL2 and instead spend money to put a secondary fuel structure, transfer structure on the cargo dock, the savings of about $100 million. So signs are pointing that that's the way we'll go.
Boy, there was a whole lot of squealing in the background, Sharon.
If some other folks could mute, if you're not speaking, if you could mute, that'll help with that. I was just saying that the initial analyses that we've done build a second POL as in the original, called the 2018 version of the program, versus putting an alternative fuel transfer facility, call it a second hose tower for now, on the cargo docks. It looks like it's a savings of $100 million. So it certainly, signs are pointing that will be the answer, but we're not quite yet. That'll be talked about at the charrette.
Does that include dismantling POL2, Sharon?
No, that cost
Yes.
does not include bringing it down. Oh, it does, Jeff? Okay, sorry.
Yes. Yep. We have to demo POL2.
Right, and when you demo POL2, is the $100 million savings that you're touting, does that include the cost of demoing POL2?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay. Hearing none at this time. New business, I guess.
And Brad, we have no new business to put before you guys today.
Okay. That moves us on to public comment. We could ask you to raise your hand, and we'll have Steve or Jim call on you. I guess you can see who's up. Steve.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to look at, where do I look to see if people have raised their hands? This is new territory for me.
Look in your participants list, and nobody has their hand up right now.
Anybody in the public have a comment?
Mr. Mattingly, I just
Yeah.
saw touch your hand.
Hey, Brad, Steve, this is Lev. I apologize. Can't raise my hand over the phone. I'm not online. But I know Sharon mentioned that she shared some of this documentation with the Tote and Matson folks. Would it be possible to share that same package, if you will, on putting the petroleum facilities onto the cargo berths with the petroleum users? Or is there something proprietary why you cannot do that?
No, Bert, help me out here. Didn't you also receive a copy of that as a representative of the fuel folks?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The analysis that we did about whether or not to have a second alternate fuel system on the cargo docks versus building a second dock for POL. And it looks like Jeff has something to respond to on that. But I thought, Bert, that you received that memo as a representative of the fuel folks. But to answer Lev's question, no, there's no reason we can't send that out. The goal is to have all the stuff available for the charrette, and the fuel folks will be involved with that as well.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate it. Just want to look through it so that I'm on the same page and caught up. And then I guess maybe just piggybacking on a question or something that Steve said, talking about using the additional revenue from the last year of petroleum to benefit the debt servicing. I thought there was a discussion at one point about using some of that to help offset some of the additional petroleum design costs. Is that still on the table or not at this point?
Boy, I'll be honest with you, Lev. I don't remember that. We can certainly look at that and see, but yeah, Cheryl and I'll have to sit down with the parish blessing folks and see if and then also run it past the CFO to see if that's something we can do. So, as I said, I honest to God don't remember that suggestion being made, but we'll take it and we'll run it to ground.
No, and Steve, I apologize. To be fair, maybe that was discussed at a different conversation. At this point, it feels like we all spend a lot of time discussing this, but ultimately and this is, I speak for myself and my organization, but I suspect that as much as we would love a reduction of tariffs, it will probably work better for everyone to repurpose some of the additional tariffs versus trying to negotiate a reduction. And it seems that using some of the COVID, if you will, driven petroleum revenue to help design the next phase of the petroleum solution seems kind of fair overall and kind of achieves that user pay model that you guys have been talking about since we got involved.
Well, let us vet that. I will take that on, and we'll have a point of view on that by the time we all meet again.
No, much appreciate that. Thank you.
And then Bert has a question.
Bert, you have your hand up?
I do. So I was just wanted to address, the specific tariffs in regards to note debt service. And I know in the past I've heard of the municipality kind of raiding the port's funds for their own usage. I was wondering if there was a way we could maybe petition the assembly to where all the funds for the tariffs increased are strictly dedicated to the debt service, and how we would go about doing that.
I think we had some discussions about reductions in MESI, or I don't know. I can't recall. I mean, there were some conversations about that previously. Maybe Cheryl or Steve remember.
Yeah, that's, I think that would be a fair request to ask, and I appreciate where you're coming from on that, Bert, because it's been, from time to time frustrating for me to see that happen, and it has happened. And it would seem unfair to, for us to look like we have way more money than we have. Something tells me, and maybe Cheryl knows, or maybe Cheryl knows where to go to check, but something tells me that that's been at least taken care of to some degree in some language I've seen in an assembly ordinance, but I just can't put my finger on exactly when it happened and what was said.
So we had an assembly action that when we adjusted the MISA, right? So we are paying less MISA on the increased revenue. So, but there isn't anything that we've sent in our documentation or request to the assembly to say, like, we are asking the assembly to set aside or basically restrict these funds for debt service. So, in a situation like that, I think what you would do is send a resolution by the Port Commission to say we want this to happen, because the Port Commission as its own body can promulgate the tariff, but as far as any restrictions like that, I think that would have to come from an assembly action. So short story is, I think we would need to check that out, Steve, just to see what options we would have to set aside those tariffs to first secure debt service coverage, and then for whatever priorities we would have.
Yeah, and that would have been my answer if you didn't chime in, is that I think the appropriate way to go about this would be for the Port Commission to provide a resolution to the assembly, preferably the Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee, and we can find out who the chair of that is now, and run it that way. That would make that recommendation. And see where that goes. I think it's the fair thing to do. It's that whole cash cow thing. Is people look at what your bottom line is. They look at what what you've got left after you've covered all your expenses, and think it's takeable. And there's really no public sector mechanism for fencing, if you will, so that it stays within the constructs of a particular need. So it's worth trying to figure out if we can do this. Absolutely.
And just to clarify Steve's frustration, we had a conversation probably 6 months ago where he informed me that it's happened in the past, and it's one of the few times I've heard Steve use a 4-letter word in describing something. So he's being very nice in describing his frustration from the past actions.
Very good. Thank you, Bert. Well, I see on the financials, we have MISA and dividend payments. It's 1.9 million. Is that, what is the dividend side of that, Cheryl?
So the dividend was an action put in place probably 4 years ago for the enterprises to pay a dividend back to the general fund on its revenues. So it's a calculation that's set out by code that we have to pay. It's 6% of your gross receipts annually is what is calculated. So I'll go back and look at the language in the assembly document that I think Mr. Falsey put forward and was passed. So but also, so like the MISA is on the net book value assets, and then the dividend is just a straight tax on the gross receipts.
Okay. Considerable increases over the years. I can imagine the city's looking for a revenue stream, so I don't have a lot of hope for that, but we'll do our part.
Yep.
Anybody else have a comment on Bert's question before we move on? Or comment, I guess. Okay.
And Mr. Haberman.
I saw Mr. Haberman had his hand up.
Yeah. Eugene?
Thank you. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. As you know, I attend a lot of your meetings, a lot of meetings out there. Number one, I raised the issue at the last board meeting, and I hope you follow through on it. To have these meetings where you go on site and if you miss it or you want to go over and hear it again, it'd be video as well as audio. The board encouraged staff to do that. I hope this one was handled that way. That's one question. Two comment, and the two is with respect whoever listens to the meeting, respect to the chair, please recognize them and identify who they are, who's ever speaking. Whether they're a board member, they need to identify as board member. If they're with a company, they need to identify a company. Because, of course, I see it happens when many of you know each other, okay, respectfully. So there's kind of a looseness that leaves out the identification. And for those who are not acquainted with as personally as you are, this leads to a problem, especially for future records of going over meetings years from now. People need to be identified and looking at that record of who was really talking on whatever issue. And then a note too, there was a reference to the Enterprise Committee of sending something over to a resolution or whatever. As you know, I attend a lot of meetings, and that's one of them too. These committees that the Assembly have, they seem to have a problem putting that information up on their site for the agendas and stuff real early. Respectfully, you do a really good job of getting that information out. I see that a great improvement. But if there is such a resolution or whatever is coming from you all going over to the Assembly Committee on Enterprise, which involves support, I would hope that, and you would encourage them to get that on the site way in advance and not the last minute or not right when the meeting starts. And thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Eugene. Jim, I see you have your hand up. Can you speak to the records keeping for either video or audio? And then if you have any other comments there on Eugene. And yes. I do apologize. We don't do a great job in identifying ourselves because of our knowledge of each other, I guess. But go ahead, Jim.
We are doing a video and audio recording of this meeting, so that is what will be posted. So I hope you all dressed your best and combed your hair. And as far as Eugene's concerned regarding identifying people, he's correct that we should do a better job at that. But Eugene, just so that you know, if you use Teams and click on the three dots where it says, I'm sorry, not the three dots, the two little people at the top of the screen, it will show the participants. And you can always tell who's talking because their icon will be highlighted and their name will be listed. So that's one way to know who's speaking.
Permission just to respond to that last part. Isn't it just letters that show up? Because I see letters like my name and it says EH, so forth. And I hope that what you're saying is true, but I just, and other names I see full names, but on the audio part, who calling it on, it just says like me, EH.
Yeah, you're, if you click on it for, I guess the show conversation, the people pop up and the full name is following it, although there are some that are listed as guest or an actual phone number. But majority of the folks are listed by the full name.
And we're not, yeah, we're not disagreeing. You are correct that we need to do a better job of identifying. I'm just letting you know that this tool's out there also.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Any other public comments? I see none at this time. Board Director closing comments. Steve?
Yeah, sure. I've got one item I would just like to share with the commission, that next Wednesday, some of us folks from the port have a meeting with J-Bear representatives. And this was set up by Alex Slivka, the CFO. through his counterpart on the base, the comptroller for the Air Base Wing. And it's going to be the start, I believe, of some municipality, base conversations that have sort of gone by the wayside for the last few years and have been left unaddressed. There's a lot of issues that, because we're neighbors.
Steve, you went mute.
I'm really sorry about that. No, what I wanted to share was next Wednesday, some representatives from the port and the CFO's office have a meeting with counterparts on the base to talk about municipality, base sort of issues, and we get to go first. They're looking for a little bit more information on how the modernization program's going, so Sharon's going to provide that. And I think we're going to, at long last, broach the subject with them that while we can make a business case for the size of dock we need to continue to conduct commerce here, we can't do the same for what their expectations are for the amount of dock they'll have for their own support. And if they are hard over to have what they're asking for now, knowing that our final design isn't going to deliver that, are they going to help pay for giving us all that we need? So we're going to probably broach that subject for the first time. Not that this is the group that can say yes or no or write the check, but they can certainly bring that issue to light to higher headquarters, who just might have the horsepower to either do something about it or make the policy call. But we're going to start those conversations next week. Might be something that that comes out of that we can talk about at the next commission meeting.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I
have. Okay. Any questions for Steve from the commission?
Steve, real quick, this is Ron Ward, Port Commissioner, for Eugene's benefit. Steve, you mentioned in the postponement of the tariff discussion that you were going to be marshaling the resources we would need to make the decision. And this is maybe the second time I've heard anything about POL2 being torn down. I could say as a port commissioner that has to try to justify and represent why the new tariff and the new dock is warranted, I'm going to have a hard time with the information that I have at hand taking down a dock that's working and adding something to the new cargo dock. I wouldn't be opposed to adding some of the new cargo dock and still having POL2 and maybe repairing some of POL2, but the port engineer referenced previously that POL2 was in terrible shape. I haven't seen anything about that. I don't think any of the other commissioners have. If they have, I'd like to hear about it. And maybe Sharon has some information, but I haven't really seen anything. I'm just getting this hearsay about a percentage of piles that are failing on POL2.
Okay.
I believe POL2 was constructed in the 80s. I'm just having a hard time believing that it's in that terrible shape. Over.
Well, I'll take a stab at the first part, and I think Jeff's going to want to chime in too. In terms of the condition in POL2 as it is right now, it's yes, it is the most recent dock, but it also has a bad corrosion problem due to an issue back in time. Its cathodic protection system was turned off, and for a couple of years it was just corroding away at an amazingly big rate. So it is in bad shape, even though it's newer. But it's not so much that as the location of POL2 once the other facilities are in place. So it won't really be accessible after the other facilities are in place unless, well, Jeff, I'll let you take it from here.
That was almost like swatting a hornet's nest and then passing it to me.
Yeah.
So right now the layout for Terminal 1, which is the lift-on, lift-off terminal, requires either 1 or 2 dolphins to the south of it. We talked initially about tying off to the POL2 dolphins on the north side of POL2, but the distances are too great. Matson would prefer that we extend dolphins out in front of POL2, which is going to cut off access. So we either have to shove the new Terminal 1 to the north about 300 feet, which is has its own set of big problems in terms of construction sequencing and stuff, so that southernmost dolphin does not project out in front of POL2. Nobody wanted to shift everything to the north 300 feet or anything. We wanted to start off with POL1 and Terminal 1 in their current location. So it's the dolphins that are going to project across the front of POL2 that cuts off access.
You want to identify yourself? Yeah.
Say again?
Could you please identify yourself and company just for records?
Oh, yep. Sorry, my apologies. Jeff Bull, I'm with the Program Management Group.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And I'll add. I'll add that these will.
With Matson's layout of Terminal 1, and it cuts off. We're cutting off the access across the front of POL2 to accommodate the new Terminal 1 construction.
So that in combination with the condition of POL2 makes the solution most prudent to do what we've talked about, take it out of service eventually and put it'll stay in place until we get the alternate fuel service, onto the cargo docks. But this will all be talked about at the charrette, which you'll certainly be invited to, Ron.
I would assume. Okay, because this is the first I've heard about Madson's requirement to be, utilizing the north end of POL2 to tie up. I would think if that's one of their requirements, there's a lot of ramifications to that beyond Morton. Anyway, all right. I look forward to seeing the information, especially about the corrosion, Sharon. That dock's half the age of the dock of the cargo dock. How could it be in such a? 2 years of anti-corrosion, I get that. Of corrosion, cathodic protection being turned off, I get that. But how many percent? What's the percentage of pilings that are affected? Because I heard that before, and I was just wondering.
Yeah, Roy and I can get that information together for you. You'll recall during the earthquake, we actually had 20% of the pilings break on POL2, and we can get that for you.
Okay, all right. I just didn't seem like there was a lot of background on this, and it just I felt like kind of blindsided that all of a sudden we're removing POL2, and so I thought it was worth discussing. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else for Steve before we move on to commissioner comments?
I had one thing, Commissioner Mackey. I was going to ask if I could get a report that Ron gets as well for those piling at PL2.
Yeah, I think they're going to give it out to all the commissioners. Am I right, Sharon?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Sharon, I'd like to see the actual number, not the percentage of failed pilings, but the number of failed pilings, if that's part of the data that's available anyway. Thank you.
Can do.
Okay. Moving on. If let's see, commissioner comments, you could raise your hand. Do you have any comments here, or want to go around the room? I guess since we're video, we'll go with raising your hand. Any comments?
Well, Bob's on the phone.
Okay.
Hey guys, this is Commissioner Mailer. I just wanted to say a quick congrats to the ports and the safety team. It's pretty impressive to go a year with zero reportable, and it says a lot, and I think you guys should be pretty proud about that.
Thank you for that.
Very good. I would agree on that sentiment. That's a challenge for
Here,
sure. Abe, commissioner comment there for you? Did we lose Abe's? Anybody hear him?
He appears to be muted.
Now I am. Now I'm here.
There you
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to echo Paul Mailer's comments on the safety record. That is truly an outstanding achievement. And I also want to report that the weather in Cancun is great.
Ouch.
I'm looking at Ron Ward's picture thinking he's probably right next door to you.
No doubt, no doubt. But I came home when it was 1 degree above zero. I questioned my sanity.
Yeah, well, we have to wonder where Garrett is as well.
Don't ask.
Aloha, right? Probably.
Roger to that. No further comments. It was a great meeting. Thanks, guys.
Okay, hey, Bob Pulaski, you just joined us. I don't know if you were listening in. Do you have any comments?
I've been here the whole time, and I appreciated going over the filing findings and further information on the filing findings. And would have preferred to be on Zoom, but at least I've got my COVID shots.
Very good. We're jealous. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I'd like to thank the port as well, and I think we're finally getting some progress here, which we appreciate. I think we do have some challenges, but we need to get this dock design going. As Bob mentioned, the clock is ticking. So, with that, we have moving on the schedule. Do we have anything particular from the port we need to identify other than the old business with the tariff? Anything specific we need to try and target, or should we go with typical every other month here?
I can't think of an upcoming milestone that would need to get you folks together any sooner. Although I do want to remind you that we slipped into February. We would have done this in mid to late January, except we had a challenge getting enough commissioners with calendar availability. So we slipped into early February, which means if you want to go to the end of March, as opposed to early April, to get back on the every other month schedule, you can take a look at that. So maybe the 3rd or 4th week of March for the next meeting, as opposed to the 1st week of April.
Okay, I'm available 24th or 31st March. Anybody have a preference? Any commissioners have a challenging flying vacation?
Bob, I fly on the 31st of March.
Okay. Anybody? 24th sound good?
24th works
for
me.
Works for me. Yep.
Works for me.
I can do the 24th.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Hopefully we'll get some of that additional information and from the port in terms of where they're at with the design plan and fuel vault or whatever that ends up being. Assumption is we want to design it in regardless, it sounds like. So we will set the 24th of March for the next meeting. And any other comments before we adjourn? Seeing none, everybody stay healthy and stay safe in your travels. So it looks like some people are getting the most of it, and appreciate everyone's time.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Good meeting, Brad. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Good meeting, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.